A single dad waiter saved a young woman in the rain. Days later, his daughter recognized her on TV. The city lay washed in winter rain. Heavy sheets poured from a dark sky, drumming against rooftops and glistening pavement. Streetlights flickered gold across puddles, making the sidewalks glow like wet glass. It was a night when most people rushed to shelter, hunched beneath umbrellas. Ben Carter, 36, stepped out the back door of the diner where he worked. His shift had run late, again. He tucked a white takeout box under one arm, flipped up the collar of his jacket, and opened his umbrella. The box held leftover mac and cheese, Sophie's favorite. As usual, he cut through the park. It was faster, quieter, even in the rain. His boots splashed softly through puddles as he walked. Then he heard it. A sharp clatter, metal on concrete, a short gasp. Ben slowed. Near the trees ahead, he saw a young woman crouched on the ground. One knee soaked in a puddle, she was frantically gathering her spilled belongings. Her purse lay open, coins scattered, a torn wallet, a cracked phone, one high heel broken, the other missing. Her hair was soaked and clung to her cheeks. Her coat's left strap was ripped. Her lip, was that blood? She wasn't crying, wasn't calling out, just trembling, struggling to zip her purse with shaking hands. Ben's gut clenched. She had been mugged. He scanned the dark around them, but whoever had done it was long gone. She didn't look at him, didn't speak. Ben approached slowly. He didn't ask if she was okay, didn't push. He simply stepped beside her and tilted his umbrella over her head. She flinched slightly but didn't pull away. Then, without a word, he took off his jacket and gently placed it on her shoulders. From behind, careful, quiet. She turned. Her face was pale, eyes wide, mascara smudged but not running. Her expression was not panicked, just exhausted. Her voice when she finally spoke was low and hoarse. "Thank you." Ben crouched beside her. "Let me help." She shook her head quickly. "Please, no police, no ambulance." Their eyes met. Her fear was real, but so was something else, a kind of worn-down strength, a silence Ben recognized. "Okay," he said. "No questions." He helped her up. She leaned into his arm, just briefly, then straightened. He gathered her scattered things and handed them over. "Come on," he said. "I know a place. It's warm. It's close." She hesitated, then followed. The diner's 24-hour lights glowed over faded booths and chipped tiles. He led her to a corner table and ordered 2 cups of ginger tea. While she waited, she sat motionless, gripping the cup when it came like it might disappear. Ben returned and sat down. She spoke softly. "I didn't think anyone would stop." He nodded. "Someone always should." She looked at him for a long second, then said, "Lila." "Ben." That was it. 15 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside. She stood quickly. "That's my ride." She adjusted the coat, his coat, and looked back at him. Her voice was quieter this time. "I won't forget this." A beat passed. "Thank you for treating me like a human being." Then she left. Ben remained standing at the window. His coat was still warm. He didn't know her story, didn't know what she'd run from, but something about her eyes stayed with him, eyes that looked like the storm had lived inside them far longer than tonight. That night, when he got home, Sophie was asleep at the table, curled around her spelling book. Ben covered her with a blanket, set the food on the counter, and stood in the kitchen a long time, still thinking of Lila. The next morning, sunlight broke through gray clouds. The TV played softly during breakfast. Sophie, mid-spoonful, suddenly pointed. "Daddy, that's the nice lady, the one who helps people. I want to be like her." Ben turned toward the screen. There she was, Lila Monroe, founder of Voices Reclaimed, speaking gently in an interview about advocacy, hope, and healing. Her voice calm, her presence steady. It was her. Sophie hadn't seen her face last night, but somehow she knew. Ben smiled faintly. "Yes," he said, "she's very special." And for the first time in a long while, something shifted inside him. Something small, quiet, but real. 1 week later, the rain was just a memory. The sun filtered through the tall windows of the city's public library, painting golden lines across the old wooden floors. It was a quiet Saturday morning, Ben's favorite kind. He walked slowly beside his daughter Sophie, who gripped a colorful tote bag with a cartoon fox on it, ready to fill it with books. They visited the library most weekends. It was their little ritual: borrow stories, make up new ones, then stop by the food truck on the way home for hot cocoa and fries. Sophie skipped ahead to the children's section, her pigtails bouncing. She was already flipping through a picture book before Ben had even turned the corner. He smiled, then wandered deeper into the atrium to wait. That was when he noticed the table. It was set up near the reading area, folding chairs, stacks of donated books, and a small banner that read, "Legal Aid and Literacy Outreach for Women." Volunteers handed out flyers and chatted with visitors. And standing among them, with quiet confidence, was Lila. She was speaking to an older woman clutching a large print mystery novel, nodding kindly as she explained something about tenant rights. Her voice was soft but assured. She looked entirely at home here. Ben froze. She had not seen him. For a moment, he considered turning away. The library was large. He could pretend he hadn't noticed. But something in him held him there. Then, a familiar voice broke the moment. "That's her. Daddy, that's the lady from the TV." Sophie had returned, holding a stack of books, her voice ringing with recognition. Ben flinched. "Sophie." Lila looked up. Her smile faded slightly as her gaze landed on the girl, then on him. For a moment, she just stared. Recognition flickered. Then her lips parted. "You," she said softly. Ben gave a small, sheepish nod. "Hi." Lila tilted her head, smiling as she crouched to Sophie's height. "You saw me on TV." Sophie nodded proudly. "You help people. I want to help people too." Lila's smile deepened. "That's a wonderful thing to want." She stood, brushing damp hair from her face. "I almost didn't recognize you without the storm." Ben chuckled. "And you, without the broken umbrella and dramatic exit." The tension, slight but present, gave way to warmth. Later, when the event ended, Lila was helping pack up. She turned toward them again, hesitating only slightly. "We're grabbing coffee around the corner. Would you like to join?" Ben hesitated, but Sophie had already turned to him, eyes wide. "Please?" He smiled. "We'd love to." The coffee shop was cozy, the walls lined with mismatched paintings. The air smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans. Their group found a booth in the corner. One of the volunteers, a cheerful art student, offered to help Sophie make bookmarks out of recycled magazines and glitter glue. Ben and Lila sat side by side. 2 mugs steamed between them. "So," Lila said, hands wrapped around her drink. "No rain this time." Ben smiled. "No mysterious cars either." She laughed. "I owe you a better thank you than I gave that night." "You don't," Ben said gently. "I didn't do anything special." "You stopped," she replied. "That meant something." They talked easily, about small things. Sophie's obsession with jungle animals, how Lila's favorite tea reminded her of her grandmother. No one brought up that night. No one asked why she had been alone in the rain. But their silences weren't empty. They held meaning, soft pauses filled with mutual understanding. When Sophie returned, waving a sparkly lion bookmark, Lila admired it like it belonged in a museum. Ben watched them both, heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something more. It happened again. Not planned, not arranged, just happened. Ben had just finished dropping off an order for a neighbor when he spotted a familiar figure by the side of the road. Lila was kneeling beside a young woman's bicycle, her coat open, hair whipped by the wind, fingers already reddening in the cold. The girl looked distressed, bike chain off, rear tire flat. Ben pulled over without thinking. "You again," he said, popping the trunk of his car. Lila looked up, surprised, and then laughed. "Do you follow distress signals? Or is this fate?" He pulled out a hand pump and knelt beside her. "Let's call it consistent bad weather." They worked side by side, quick and quiet. The girl thanked them both with the kind of gratitude that comes from surprise. Once she was off, pedaling awkwardly down the sidewalk, Lila stood and exhaled, brushing her hair back. "Every time I meet you, I end up being helped," she said, half teasing. "It's becoming a pattern." Ben shrugged lightly. "It's not kindness, just a habit. I grew up watching who the world forgets to look out for." Lila turned, meeting his eyes. There was no pity in hers, just understanding. "I know what that's like," she said softly. They ended up walking together by the riverside trail nearby, both drawn to the quiet curve of the water and the hush that seemed to settle around it. The sky was turning gray again, the cold creeping in, but they did not hurry. Lila told him about her organization, how it had started from nothing, just a file folder and a broken printer in her mother's garage. Her mother, she explained, had lived through years of silent violence, never speaking of it until Lila was a teenager. "She finally left," Lila said, "but not before it carved years out of her. I guess I built the thing I wished she had." Ben listened quietly, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. When she finished, he nodded once. "I grew up in group homes," he said. "Mom dropped me off when I was 4. Never came back. It wasn't violent, just empty. I bounced around a lot, learned to keep my head down, stay out of the way." Lila didn't speak. He continued, voice even. "I wanted to be a chef once. Still do. But Sophie came along, and I needed a job that let me be home in time for bedtime stories. That made her smile. You chose her. Always." They walked a few more steps in silence. It was not awkward. It felt natural, the kind of pause that meant something was settling in. "No one's ever told me that before," Lila said after a while, "that they chose someone, not themselves." Ben looked out over the water. "Maybe because people who do don't usually talk about it." As they neared the end of the trail, Lila reached into her satchel and pulled out a small paper bag. "I brought this just in case I ran into you," she said, a little sheepish. "It's for Sophie." Ben opened it to find a set of coloring books, a fresh pack of crayons, and a small sticky note. "Tell your dad he's doing great." "She's special," Lila said. "Kids like her, they remind me why I do this, why I keep going." Ben looked at the bag, then at her. "You didn't have to." "I know," she cut in gently. "That's why I did." The cold nipped at their faces now, urging them to go, but neither made a move just yet. Lila finally smiled, took a step back. "See you around?" Ben nodded, slower this time. "I hope so." He watched her walk away, her steps light despite the wind. And as he stood there, holding the little bag in both hands, something stirred in his chest, not heavy, not overwhelming, just new, gentle. "I do not know if it is attraction," he thought, "but for the first time in years, I hope someone thinks about me after we part." The community center lights flickered dimly as the last of the volunteers packed up. Lila stepped out into the night, pulling her coat tighter around her. The chill in the air bit sharper than usual, and the lot behind the building felt too quiet, too still. She had just reached her car when 2 shadows moved in from the left. At first, she thought it might be someone asking for help, until she heard the voice. "Well, well, Look who's still playing hero." She turned. Two men stood in the shadows, faces half lit by the distant street lamp. Both were stocky, in their late 40s, with the kind of built-up anger that had nowhere left to hide. Lila's pulse spiked. "I don't know what you think you're doing," one of them said, voice low and full of threat, "but you need to stop sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." The other stepped forward, jaw clenched. "You broke up my family. My kids don't even talk to me." "I didn't break anything," Lila said, her voice calm despite the fear twisting in her stomach. "I helped women find a safe way out." "Safe?" the first man barked. "You think you're saving people?" The second man took another step toward her. "Maybe it's time someone made you shut up. For good." Lila's breath caught. Her fingers reached into her pocket, searching for her phone, but it was too late. He was too close. And then, "Step away from her, now." The voice was steady, cold, unmistakable. All three of them turned. Ben stood at the edge of the parking lot, his tall frame backlit by the glow of a nearby street lamp. His coat was half-buttoned, breath visible in the cold night. He took a step forward. The men stiffened. "Who the hell are you?" one of them snapped. "Her boyfriend?" Ben said nothing. He did not need to. He moved between them and Lila in one quiet, deliberate motion. His presence alone seemed to shift the air. He did not raise his fists, he did not shout. But his eyes did not flinch. The man closest to Lila scoffed, spat to the side. Typical, playing night for some woman who ruins lives. Ben looked straight at him. "She helps people escape abuse," he said, voice firm. "That's not ruining lives, that's saving them." The man sneered. "Women like her deserve what they get." Ben's jaw tightened. His voice dropped a note colder. "She deserves respect, and no one has the right to touch her, threaten her, or speak to her the way you just did." For a moment, no one moved. The silence pressed down like a weight. And then, maybe sensing they were no longer in control, the two men cursed under their breath and turned away. "Not worth it," one of them muttered. "Let's go." They disappeared into the shadows. The moment they were gone, Lila let out a breath she had not realized she had been holding. Her shoulders trembled, her throat felt tight. Ben turned to her. "Are you okay?" She opened her mouth, but no words came, only tears. She shook her head once, trying to hold it in, but it was too much. The fear, the relief, the fact that someone had stood up for her without her needing to ask. I'm fine," she whispered. Ben didn't hug her, didn't pull her close. Instead, he simply opened his umbrella, stepped beside her, and held it over them both, just as he had done the first night they met. No grand gestures, just presence. "I know you're strong," he said quietly, "but even strong people need someone to stand beside them." Lila closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. She nodded, wiping it away. And under the umbrella, in the cold silence of the parking lot, she let herself lean, just a little, into the space Ben made for her. It was not romantic. Not yet. But it was safe. And it was enough. After the incident in the parking lot, Lila refused to call the police. Ben stood beside her, waiting, quiet, letting her decide. "I appreciate you being there," she said, her voice steady despite the weight in her shoulders. "But if I make this official, if I drag them into the system again, they'll take it out on their wives, and I cannot be the reason someone else gets hurt." Ben did not argue. He only nodded once. "Then from now on, you don't have to walk alone." He did not ask again. He did not insist. But starting that night, he was always there, outside the community center, near the curb, leaning against his car with a cup of tea in hand, just in case she had not eaten. He never called it picking her up, never said protecting. When she thanked him, he simply shrugged and said, "I was heading this way anyway." They did not talk about what almost happened. But it changed something. One evening, after dropping Lila off, Sophie had already gone to bed. After pizza, a dozen questions about space travel, and a lopsided drawing of a unicorn in a tutu, Ben poured Lila a cup of hot tea. She stayed. They sat at the kitchen table in his small apartment. The room was dim, cozy, the scent of chamomile hanging gently in the air. Outside, rain tapped on the window, soft and slow. They talked about nothing and everything. About how Lila liked instrumental music when she worked, how Ben used to dream of becoming a chef before realizing single parenthood changed the shape of dreams. About favorite childhood snacks, losing shoes in the grocery store, and the small panic of hearing your name called over a loudspeaker as a child. It was easy. It was still. Lila got up to put her cup in the sink, and her eyes caught a photo on the fridge, a small, slightly faded snapshot held in place by a chipped magnet shaped like a dinosaur. It was Ben, younger, maybe 25. Hair messier, eyes tired but full. He was holding a newborn wrapped in a pale pink blanket, his hospital visitor's tag barely visible. His smile was crooked and stunned, like he had just realized his entire life had changed in a second. "She was only 6 pounds," he said behind her, voice quiet. "I was terrified." Lila turned. He was not looking at the photo, just holding his mug, watching the steam rise. "She's from a short relationship," he added. "The mom. She left a few hours after Sophie was born. No hard feelings. She just knew she wasn't ready. I didn't think I was either, but someone had to be." Lila walked back to the table, sat down. She did not ask questions. She did not press. She only looked at him, and for the first time, something softened in her gaze, not just admiration but something closer to understanding. Still, she said nothing about herself, about her past, about why she knew what fear looked like in a woman's eyes, or why she carried emergency cash in her shoe. Not yet. It was late when she finally stood, ready to leave. Ben walked her to the door, keys already in hand. Outside, the night was quiet, just the gentle hush of street light and drizzle. Before stepping through the doorway, Lila paused. "You're always helping," Ben said suddenly. "You're always the one people turn to. But who helps you when you're the one running on empty?" She did not answer right away. Her smile came slowly, but her eyes shimmered slightly, glistening in the hallway light. "I've learned how not to run empty," she said softly. Ben nodded, unsure what to say. He opened the door for her. She turned once more before stepping out, meeting his eyes fully. "You know," she said, voice a touch hushed, "not many people make me feel safe when they're quiet." She smiled, and then she was gone. Ben stood at the door for a long moment after. He knew what it was like to carry weight alone, and now he wondered what it might be like to share even a little of it with someone who understood without needing to ask. One quiet evening, while drawing at the kitchen table, Sophie looked up at Ben with a question that made him pause mid-step. "Daddy, does Miss Lila have a family?" Ben stopped, towel in hand. "Why do you ask, honey?" Sophie shrugged, hesitant. "I just think, even when she smiles, her eyes look like they're remembering something sad." Ben stood still for a moment, glancing toward the window. Rain tapped lightly against the glass. Sophie's words echoed in the room, too perceptive for a child, too true to ignore. He had felt it too. That quiet inside Lila. Not peace, but weight. Later that week, during setup for a community event, one of the older volunteers, Maria, approached Ben with a folded newspaper clipping. "I thought you might have known," she said softly. "Most of us do, but we let her lead the way." Ben unfolded it. The headline read, "Survivor turns advocate. Lila Monroe breaks silence. After 6-month ordeal." The article, dated several years ago, told how Lila had vanished for months, kidnapped and held by her then fiancé in a remote cabin. A man with wealth, charm, no prior record. When she escaped, she disappeared from public life, until she re-emerged to start the very organization she now ran. Ben's throat tightened. She had never told him. That night, he sat with Sophie until she fell asleep. He stared at Lila's name on his phone screen for a long time, but he did not call. The next day, at a self-defense class Lila helped teach, he waited for a quiet moment. No fanfare, no confrontation. While she handed out foam pads, he approached, voice low. "I read something." Lila turned, her hands freezing mid-motion. "I'm not mad," Ben said gently. "I just hate that you've carried that alone." For a second, she did not move. Then her shoulders trembled. She turned away, pressing her hands to her eyes, but the tears came anyway. "It's not the secret," she whispered. "It's the way people look at me after." Ben kept his distance, but his voice was close. "I'm not looking at you any differently." Her gaze met his, raw and unsure. "You might think I'm broken." "No," he said. "I think you're strong. Stronger than anyone should have to be by themselves." She looked down, trying to breathe. But those words, simple, quiet, landed somewhere deep. Not because of their meaning, but because they came from someone who had never asked her to explain. Someone who stayed. Later, as the class ended and the women filtered out, Lila walked with Ben toward the exit. Before they stepped outside, she stopped. "Can I tell you something?" He nodded. "I don't remember his face anymore," she said. "The man who hurt me. It's like fog. I can't hold on to it." Ben waited. "But I think," she added softly, "I'll always remember yours." Her voice cracked slightly. "You're the first person who made me want to believe again." She did not cry. Not this time. And Ben did not reach for her, did not speak in poetry. He just stood beside her, quiet, still, the kind of silence that heals, the kind that stays. Sunday morning came quiet and gray. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the community center, matching the gentle hum of anticipation that usually filled the room before a workshop began. But this time, something was missing. Lila did not show up. At first, Ben thought she might be running late. He checked his phone, no message. He texted her anyway. "Everything okay? Want me to bring coffee?" But the message stayed unread. He called her once, no answer. By noon, the staff began rearranging the session without her. A young volunteer mentioned casually, "She told us on Friday she needed a break. Just said it might be for a few weeks." No reason given. Ben said nothing. He left early that day. That evening, after putting Sophie to bed, he walked to Lila's apartment. The building was quiet. Her lights were off. Her mailbox was stuffed full, flyers, letters, a small envelope poking out at the edge. But it was the small object on the doorstep that made him pause. A folded black umbrella. His. The same one he had given her the night they met. It was resting neatly beside the doorframe. And tucked carefully under the handle, held in place by a thin rubber band, was a note. A single line in familiar, delicate handwriting. "Thank you for letting me be myself. Sometimes, to heal, we have to walk away. But I carry this with me." Ben read it 3 times before folding it into his palm. He stood outside her door for several minutes, listening to the stillness, as if silence might offer more clues. There were none. When he returned home, the apartment felt heavier than usual. Sophie was still asleep, sprawled across the couch with a book slipping from her hand. Ben watched her for a moment, then sat down beside her with a sigh. He was trying to be quiet, trying to stay steady. But Sophie stirred, blinked up at him, and frowned slightly. "Where's Miss Lila?" Ben hesitated. "She's taking some time away." Sophie looked at him more closely now, noticing the tired eyes, the distant voice. Then, Without saying anything, she climbed onto the couch and wrapped her arms around his neck. Her voice, small but sure, came next. "Daddy, do you think sometimes good people need to disappear for a while, just to remember how good they really are?" Ben closed his eyes, held her tighter. He did not answer. But he thought about the quiet sadness in Lila's smile, the strength behind her silence, the way she carried so much without asking anyone to hold even a part of it for her. And now, she was gone. A week passed. Then 2. Ben kept moving through his days like clockwork. He went to work, picked Sophie up from school, helped with homework, folded laundry. But something essential felt missing, like a song just under his breath had gone quiet. Every time he passed by the park, he glanced toward the old path where they had first met. There was no storm now, no wind, no woman with tearless eyes and trembling hands. Just wet pavement and trees stripped bare for winter. At night, Ben sat by the kitchen table, the old umbrella resting by the door. He had not moved it. Somehow, it felt like a line of connection, something she had touched, something she had left behind without fully saying goodbye. He did not know where she had gone, or when she might return. But he knew this. What he missed was not just her laugh or her kindness. It was the way she made him feel seen without ever asking for anything in return. It was the quiet space they created, one not filled with expectations or fear, but understanding. He missed the version of himself that only existed when she was around. And in the silence of her absence, he realized something else. There are some people you do not meet by accident, and some spaces, once filled by them, never feel quite whole again. It was a quiet Thursday evening, the kind where the rain tapped lightly on the windows and the kitchen smelled of garlic and butter. Ben was stirring a pot of soup while Sophie set the table, humming softly to herself. Then, the doorbell rang. They exchanged a glance. Ben wiped his hands on a towel and walked to the door. When he opened it, no one was there. Just the low hum of the evening and the sound of distant traffic. At his feet sat a small brown package wrapped neatly with twine. No name, no return address. Ben brought it inside. Sophie leaned in with wide eyes as he untied the string. Inside, folded carefully, a soft linen handkerchief embroidered with a single word in blue thread, Hope. A small book titled Letters I Never Sent. The pages were filled with handwritten reflections and moments of pain turned into strength. And at the bottom, an ivory envelope. Inside the envelope, a formal invitation. Voices reclaimed, an evening of stories and survival. Saturday, 7 p.m., Community Cultural Center. Ben held the invitation for a long moment, then looked at Sophie. Her voice was small. "Do you think it's from her?" He did not need to answer. She already knew. The event hall was unlike any Ben had stepped into before. It glowed, not with spotlights, but with candlelight. White flowers lined the walls. Simple wooden chairs filled the space, all turned toward a small stage draped in soft gray fabric. Sophie gripped his hand, looking around in awe. "She made this feel like a story," she whispered. Ben nodded. "She is a story." Then, the room dimmed further, and Lila stepped onto the stage. She wore a deep blue dress, plain, elegant, no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back loosely. She was not hidden by makeup or shielded by a podium. She simply stood there, in the quiet, and let the light rest gently on her. The room hushed completely. When she spoke, her voice was clear, but not loud, not forced. "I used to think survival was about silence," she said. "About staying small enough not to be seen, not to be heard again." She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "But healing, it is not loud either. Healing is in the soft things, the quiet people, the hands that never close, even when they are shaking." She looked down for a moment, then smiled. Not for effect, not for the audience, but for herself. "There was a night," she continued, "in the rain. I was not okay, but someone stopped, not to ask questions, not to demand explanations, just to give me tea, to offer quiet, to offer dignity." Her voice trembled, just slightly, and from the way he looked at me, I knew I was still a person, even after everything. Ben's eyes did not leave her. At the end of her speech, the room rose in applause, but her eyes searched only one part of the room. They found him. Sophie stood first, tugging Ben's hand. He rose slowly. Their eyes met across the room. No one said a word, but everything was spoken in that silence. Lila smiled, not the cautious, practiced smile he had once seen, but one that came from breath, from life, from a place finally warm. Later, they walked through the city. Rain had begun again, gentle, silver, barely more than mist. Sophie danced ahead, leaping between puddles with the freedom only children carry. Ben and Lila walked side by side. No umbrella this time. Just soft rain on their coats and the sound of their footsteps echoing through the street. "This rain," Ben said quietly, "is where we met." Lila looked up at the sky, eyes calm. "And this rain," she replied, "is where I no longer feel the need to hide." He reached for her hand. This time, she did not pull away. They stopped in front of the old diner. Warm light glowed from inside, just like it had that night. Lila looked at the window, then at Ben. "You hungry?" He smiled. "Always." They stepped inside, into the familiar, into the imperfect warmth. No longer strangers, no longer just survivors, but people who had broken and now sat side by side, not fixed but full, together. If this story moved you even just a little, we hope you'll carry its message with you, that healing comes in quiet moments, and sometimes strangers become the people who help us find our way back to ourselves. If you want more stories like this, full of heart, hope, and humanity, don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. And if you believe in the power of kindness, hit that hype button to support the channel. Every click helps us keep telling the stories that remind us, even in the rain, light finds a way.